Thank you, Kate, so much. Well, I am Michelle Pemberton. Oh, wow. I'm just not used to the big bubble. This is what we're going to remember. Oh, yeah. Mom would like that. She loved to laugh. And she loved this place. This was her church of many decades. And it's really an honor to me and to our family that you're here with us today to celebrate her life. And one of the terms we have in our family for people who live life really well is we call them, you are a force. You are a force. And she was a force for good. And you know, this last 3+ years of her journey, we've lost her bit by bit. And I realized after she died that I didn't let myself think about the mom of the 77 years before that I've known. I just had to take what was in front of me and who she was. And so it has been a gift, you guys, to remember who she was and how God made her and how she lived her life. And I might cry, and that's okay. So for the last 28 years, we lived 5 minutes apart. And she was game to help me with anything, any kind of project. I would say, Mom, so twice a year, we would declutter my house, and it's a Pemberton word called reaming, R-E-A-M-I-N-G. I don't think it's in a dictionary anywhere, but she would come over to my house when Stacy and Amy were gone, and we would go through stuff, give away toys, box up clothes. These guys never knew that anything was missing. But twice a year she'd do that. She helped me paint every single room in my house. She would come, or my favorite thing that I've already missed, because you guys know that I've moved to a farm of 3 acres. I don't like dead things, dead animals, and so I would call her and say, Mom, there is a dead possum on my front side. Why would you come take care of it? I'm serious. 10 or 15 times she had to do that while I lived there. And this weekend, there was a dead bird on my front porch. And I did it, Mom. I did it. With a snow shovel and a bag that I couldn't see through. Oh my gosh. I'm not saying I'm doing anything bigger than a bird. So I might be calling you, Mark Elster, to come help me with my dead wildlife. But one of my favorite things that we did, so she was a learner, you guys know that. She loved to learn, and so it was about time to potty train Stacy. So she went to the library, and we were so proud of this. She bought a book, checked out a book called Potty Training in a Day. So we went to my mom's house because she had linoleum, and we quarantined it off. My dad and Stacy and Amy's dad were nowhere to be found. Like, they were not going to be a part of what was going to happen. But we did it with both kids. Now, we got number 1 down. 2 took a little longer, but 1, man, but their responses were so funny. Like Stacy, my oldest, was so compliant, and at one point I said, look, if we don't have some success, I'm gonna have to take your blanket away. And she got very serious. And then Amy, oh my gosh, you were so mad at us. Like, you had to practice if you had an accident. But you got it, babe. And it was awesome. But she would just help me with so many different projects. You guys, she loved school. She had 2 masters, a BA and then 2 masters, and then a PhD in reading education. But I think one of the bravest things she did was when she was 55, the age that I am right now, and our family was facing a major crisis. And she made this bold move, she and my dad, to say, what part do we play in the fact that our family is really in crisis? And she was willing to embrace this. And if you ever talk to her, you know that she has studied Bowen family systems theory. And a brief description of what that is a theory of human behavior that views the family as this emotional unit or a system. And it uses systems thinking to describe the complex interactions that happen between families members. And it's the nature of the family that we are intensely connected emotionally. And her study over the last 25 years of Bowen systems has impacted our lives and the generations to come. And she really took it on. She wanted to have, one of her goals was to have a one-on-one relationship with each member of her family. And she would be so happy, you guys, that you are here today. She loved each of you so much. Dory Moore described my mom this way. She said she was a seeker. And a hallmark of this woman was the capacity to use her thinking brain and her intellect. She valued thinking and learning, and it informed her emotional process. Not always, but it was her effort to do that. She also loved books, you guys. My parents' house, there were books everywhere. Every horizontal service, books or magazines. She loved to buy books for people, and one of the things she would tell me is, hey, you can't spoil somebody by buying them a book. I think that just gave her more license to buy books for the grandkids. She just loved books. She cut out articles all the time to send to us. She loved NPR and PBS. And when she was 50, like this was 30 years ago, you guys, she worked at UMKC in the Department of Education, and she networked computers together, which is crazy. She was actually more technical than I am. She had an iWatch, an iPad, and oh my gosh, she loved all things technical. She began texting because she wanted to make sure to connect with Stacy and Amy. She loved my dad deeply. They were each other's best friends, two introverts who loved to learn, who loved the arts and loved this church. He called her, in special moments, he called her Deloris Ann. She was deeply devoted, and she was a great caregiver when he got sick and developed Alzheimer's and multiple myeloma. It was a difficult road for both of them, and she learned how to be the decision maker, how to make healthcare decisions, and how to be the lead horse in their marriage. And when my dad died in 2009, it was really, really difficult for her. But I am so grateful, you guys, that she chose to stay engaged with life and build her own life the last 9 years. This was a huge loss for her, but she was resilient. And the funny thing, she learned how to spend money on herself. My parents were big savers, but she was like, this is the rainy day, and I'm gonna travel and see friends and do things. She updated their house that was stuck in the 1970s. And she just had fun. If somebody invited her to see them, she would hop on a plane and go see them. She loved visiting her brother at his farm in Illinois, or visiting Paul and Z at their house in Florida. She took this amazing trip with my cousin Kate, who just read the scripture, to Florida. Not Florida, Paris. Much better than Florida. And she loved that time. This cracks us up. So at 73, she went camping with Kate's husband, Gavin, like out in the mountains in a tent, which I'm not doing at 55. But she loved learning from Gavin and seeing the stars, and it meant so much to her. She loved to visit the girls in California. They took many great trips. She and I traveled to Florida to see her sister-in-law Kay and my cousin Terry. She just did some amazing things. One of the things I learned from her as a mother that I really valued was that we were more important than stuff. My brother Mark and I. If we broke something, we didn't get a lecture. She didn't freak out. And a few years ago, she updated this house, and I'm sitting in this brand new chair, and I'm doing some work, and I get pin on the chair, the brand new chair. And I'm like, oh, seriously? And she was unflappable because we were more important than things. One of the things she did as a mother, as a grandmother, that was really helpful is she never told me how to parent. She respected my parenting and trusted me to figure out this greatest, hardest adventure that you'll ever love. And I loved that about her. She was also super flexible around the house. She didn't have one certain way to flow the laundry or load the dishwasher. She was just grateful that you were helping. One of her parenting weaknesses that I inherited was the inability to get your kids to help around the house. So she was never good at the chore charts, but every so often we would get this lecture. My dad would sit us down, Mark and I, and say, "Your mother is not a maid." And our functioning would pick up for a little bit. Mark did much better with his own kids. He's gotten them to mow the lawns and take the trash out, stuff that I was not able to do with my own kids. One of the things I loved about her, if she loved something, she was not embarrassed by embracing that fully. If you ever sat by my mom in church, you know she had a terrible singing voice. Like, I'm talking tone deaf. Like, if she hummed "Happy Birthday," you might not be able to figure it out. But that did not stop her from singing. She loved, I found it very blessed, she would sing full force. She loved to hear. My daughter Amy has a beautiful voice, and Mark has a wonderful voice, and she was always wanting them to sing. Ask the girls, we have a tape of Mom singing the Northwestern fight song after Stacy's college graduation that is hilariously bad. But she was so proud. She was so generous, you guys, with her time and her money and organizations that she loved. She loved this church. She and my dad set up a UMKC medical scholarship fund for folks who were under-resourced. She contributed her time and energy to Bowen Theory, to Eden Seminary, to Chautauqua, to the Kansas City Rep, the opera, the ballet, to Friends in Need, and providing college and graduate school education for her and my dad was just a huge gift that they've given us. She loved giving experiences to people, inviting them to a play or to an experience or to a lecture or even to Chautauqua. My mother, as we all are, was a blend of strengths and weaknesses. And I think one helpful way to look at someone's life is to look at how did they handle their weaknesses. So I want to share one or two things that happened, the weaknesses that she was very well aware of in her life and she worked on. And one of them was with her generosity. She was an oldest overfunctioner, and that means doing things for other people that often they could do for themselves. And at times having a superior or know-it-all or caretaking kind of stance. And with her generosity, sometimes there would be this thing called quid quo pro, which would mean if she gave you something, then she wanted something in return. This was a long-standing pattern in our multi-generational family that she was repeating. And I have to tell you guys, quid quo pro has damaging effects on relationships. And through her study of Bowen, she became aware of this dynamic and worked hard to do it differently. But it was a pretty well-worn pattern in her life. And it's one that I, as her daughter, want to do differently and don't want it to live on to the next generation. She struggled with navigating differences with others. I grew up watching my parents, they never had a fight. Like, they never had a fight. They did peace at any price, and both of them would give in to make sure that they kept the peace. The only thing I remember them fighting about, I don't know why my dad did this, but he would not tell her who he voted for in the 1960 presidential election. And it just drove her nuts. She was a lifelong Democrat, and man, if he had not voted for Kennedy, that was going to be really bad. But you can't live with somebody that long and not have differences. And once, 25 years ago, she began to see a coach. They began to take on navigating differences. And it was hard for them, but they did it. And after my dad died, my mom and I had to do our own work of navigating differences, of figuring out how do we live and be present to each other without this key person being gone from both of us. And it wasn't easy, but we did some really important work for us each to learn how to think differently and talk about it and honor each other in the midst of our differences. One of the things I would say about her is that it might take her some time, but she was willing to admit when she was wrong and ask for forgiveness. When I was growing up, she was overly focused on my weight, which was difficult and painful for me that she was focused on it. And she grew up with parents that were focused on her weight. But because of her study of Bowen, she really regretted her intrusiveness and offered her apologies to me many times. My daughter Amy said recently, I think some of the mistakes that Grandma made with you and Mark, she did differently with her grandkids. And I think, you guys, that is real progress. Like, she is looking at her weaknesses and addressing them. When we moved back to Kansas City when Stacy was 9 months old, my mom declared herself, she's like, I don't want to be a babysitter, but I want to know my grandkids, and I want to have 1 day a week with them. And she did. They had their day, and they got to choose what they did. When Amy came along, she was really clear, yeah, you get another day because I don't want them together because they would fight. So they each, growing up, got to spend these incredible days with my mom. And that meant dinner with my dad. And the kids got to decide. Amy loved to bake cakes and go to Science City, and they would go to the library, and they would go to performances. And one day Mom took Amy out of school and took her to see Yo-Yo Ma. My parents love classical music. They took her to puppet shows and whatever they wanted to do. Stacy told this funny story that I'd never heard of. She went to Lawrence for, in like 4th grade for a field trip. And in the bookstore, she found these magnets that she really liked, but she didn't have any money. I was afraid she was going to tell me that she stole the magnets, but she did not steal the magnets. But what she did when it was her day with Grandma, she said, college education is important, and we have this college that's 45 minutes away. Why don't we go check it out? Let's go to the bookstore. And then they got in there, and I still have one of the magnets on my refrigerator. I did not know this story till this weekend, but Mom then put it together. This is why we were in Lawrence. She wanted to buy magnets. One of the things Stacy told me was that whenever the kids were with them, she was present to them. She didn't have tasks or phone calls or errands she needed to run. She just invested in their time and whatever they wanted to do. And as a full-time working single mom, let's be honest, the zoo trips, the Science City trips, they're just the stuff I wouldn't have had time or energy to do. And I don't like science museums, babe, so you got to go because of Grandma. Stacy has already asked me what kind of grandma I want to be. What's my intentions? And I have thought about how high my mother has set the bar of being an invested, connected, present grandmother. And I want to do that well. I want to do that well like she did. And if you ask Stacy and Amy, they will say to you how much influence their grandparents had on them because of this time and who they were and their investment in their lives. Murray Bowens has this quote that my mom loved, and it really was the type of life that she was working to live, and it says this: gaining more knowledge of one's distant families of origin can help one become aware that there are no angels or devils in a family. They were human beings, each with their own strengths and weaknesses, each reacting predictably to the emotional issue of the moment, and each doing the best that they could with their own life course. Hers was not a perfect life, but it was an examined life, well lived. It has been a long goodbye with my mom, and there's so many of you that I could thank for staying present with her in this process, but there are 2 people I want to thank. I'm so grateful to Carrie Robson from Agility Therapy for Seniors. Her gentle spirit has walked us through the last 2 years, and I can't thank you enough for your love and your advocacy and your sense of humor and your care for my mom and me, Carrie. We couldn't have done this without you. And then my cousin, Dr. Kate Nepper. When you grow up in a medical family, and my mom's dad and brother and uncles were all doctors, you have this benefit of having this doctor that can be with you in these hard moments and translate, like, what are they saying? And so, Kate, you have walked with us with such grace and wisdom, and you went to the Mayo Clinic with her and with me, and I am so incredibly grateful for just walking us through this process. In 2015, one of the things I asked for my birthday, because we're a weird family, we talk openly about death, and I said, Mom, you gotta write your healthcare directive, you gotta tell me what you want. And so she got this booklet called The Caring Conversations, and she'd want you to know that you can Google that and print it out. And she did that with her friend Sally, and she got clear because, you guys, I had to make decisions for her because she couldn't make them for her own. And she wrote up this beautiful document that was so helpful for Mark and I. And here's what she said. I have lived a good life, and I'm not afraid to die. And I believe that when I die, my spirit will join the great cloud of witnesses from Hebrews 12. Many times, Mom and I talked openly about her death and that her story here wasn't over. And one of the verses she loved that Erin read at the beginning, it was one of her mother's favorite verses. It was from Revelations 21. Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. And he will wipe every tear from their eyes. And there will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. He who is seated on the throne said, I am making all things new. And I believe, and Mom believed, that her story wasn't over, and that she is in heaven with God, and he made all things new. And I think he said to her, Deloris Ann, well done, my good and faithful servant. Well done.